Welcome back to Pokémon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 301, a Mudkip mission. The episode begins with Ash having decided that he had done all the training he needed to at the inlet, and therefore he wanted to try and find another place on Dewford Island to train. So, Ash and the gang found themselves walking along a river, looking for a new place to train. While they were walking, May got a little bored, so she decided to have some fun as she pretended to be a reporter for herself, pretending to record the journey as she talked to an imagined audience, announcing that it was time for another installment of her show, May's Expeditions, as she formed a camera position with her hands and pretended like she was filming herself. Going on about how she hoped that doing all this walking across Dewford would help her in some way with becoming a better coordinator, stating that that was the expedition part, trying to find what in the area would make her a better coordinator. May proceeded to ask Ash, Brock, and Max for some interviews where they were supposed to talk about her for her imagined video, although Ash, Brock, and Max weren't down for this, bored just listening to May's blabbering and her talking to herself. So they decided to distract themselves by looking at the Pokénav for information on the area, with Max hoping that he would find potential sightings of rare or unique Pokemon in the area. Max then got excited as his hopes were confirmed when the Pokénav notified him that there were apparently several different types of unique Pokemon in the area. Ash was already excited to explore the area to find a new training place, but he was even more excited when hearing about all these rare Pokemon, hoping he could catch one. As for May, she was continuing to fake record herself when she suddenly informed her fake audience, apparently zooming in on a waterfall up ahead, declaring that they were at a dead end as the waterfall blocked their way, so their only way to get past the waterfall was to climb it, and it was obviously very steep, and waterfalls weren't meant to climb. Knowing how difficult the climb would be, May wondered if they were going to actually be able to get up, but thankfully, Brock had an idea, determined to get up, since he wanted to find rare Pokemon just like Ash and Max, and he suspected that above this waterfall would be where the rare Pokemon were, believing that they were rare since a lot of people wouldn't have the balls or the skills to climb up the waterfall. Brock then put his idea into action as he sent out his Lotad, and grabbed a nearby stone that was on the ground and tied it to some rope, which he pulled out of his backpack, and then he threw the rope up into the air, allowing Lotad to propel the rope with his water gun, which pushed the rope up the waterfall and onto a tree branch at the top of the waterfall. Basically, now that the rope was tied to a tree branch on the waterfall, Ash and the gang could climb up the rope to get atop the waterfall, and Brock went first as he grabbed the rope, pulling it tight to make sure it was secure, and instructed Ash, May, and Max to follow him as he began to climb with Lotad on his shoulder. Unbeknownst to Brock, though, May had actually already went up the waterfall while Brock was doing all of his rope shenanigans. So by the time Brock made it to the top of the waterfall, May was already there and helped him up, and also helped Ash up when he made it to the top as well. Ash was obviously startled upon seeing May, as he thanked her for helping him up and complimented Brock on the great idea he had, although he admitted that he was very curious as to how May managed to get up before him and Brock, when Brock was the one who had seemingly started climbing first. This led May to reveal that Brock wasn't the only one to have come up with an idea to get up the waterfall, stating that she actually had a better idea and was going to use it to help Ash and Brock get up as well, but Brock had implemented his idea first. Also stating that as a reporter, yeah, that's right, she still was pretending to be a genuine reporter. She felt like she had to be the first one up, so she felt it was necessary for her to come up with her own way, instead of relying on someone else, since they would likely get up before her, since they would know their way better than anyone else, and explained that the method that she used was using her Silcoon, which she called extremely cute, to use String Shot to pull her up. Essentially, May just grabbed onto the Silcoon's String Shot, and Silcoon was apparently able to climb up and pull May with it. Upon hearing how May got up, Ash, Brock, and Max were immensely glad that they didn't have to utilize this way as well, as they thought that it would be very dangerous, since Silcoon's String Shot could have broke at any moment with all their weight. And Max made fun of May, stating that if she wanted to be a real reporter, then she shouldn't have gave away the secret as to how she got up, since reporters never were supposed to give up secrets. Just then, due to climbing up the waterfall, Ash and the gang were able to see a much clearer picture of their surroundings, as Ash noticed a foggy lake behind them. Although they noticed a foggy lake in front of them as well, although they appeared to be somewhat separate, leading Max to check his Pokénav to further investigate this, as he determines that the current in the lake spread around a small island. So basically, what appeared to be two lakes was actually one lake, but they were simply just split by an island in the middle. And this island was what Ash and the gang could instantly see in the distance from the waterfall. Essentially, there was a lake behind them, and then the island, and then another side of the lake beyond the island. Ash and the gang obviously wanted to go check out this lake on the other side of the island, in hopes that they would encounter the rare Pokemon there. However, May was hesitant to go, as she feared that the water that was raging down from the waterfall would end up going into the other lake, and therefore making the lake really rough, and she feared the water would essentially spill out. But Max assured her that the lake's water was very gentle and not rough, since the island did a good enough job of stopping the rushing flow of the waterfall, and essentially slowing it down. So, Ash and the gang decided to head to this other lake, having to cross the island first. Brock was the most excited, so he went on a bit ahead of the rest of the gang, and therefore warned the rest of the gang that the ground was pretty muddy up ahead, and sure enough, it was, as they all trudged through regardless. Eventually, after making it through the muddy part of the island, they soon stepped out of the fog that was surrounding the area, and they were now at the edge of the lake that they wanted to get to, which was larger than the first part of the lake. When Ash and the gang approached the lake, the thing that piqued their interest the most was a group of Pokémon, including some babies of the species, which May recognized as a Mudkip, remembering her previous encounter with a Mudkip when she called out Professor Birch's one when Professor Birch wanted to save her from the Poochyena back in the first episode of the Advanced season. Ash was also able to identify the Pokemon as Mudkip when he scanned them with his Pokedex. Despite May's previous encounter with the Mudkip not going well and resulting in her getting soaked, she quickly changed her mind from not wanting one to really wanting one when she noticed the baby Mudkip, finding them extremely adorable and declaring that she wanted a very adorable water Pokemon. So, as Ash, Brock, and Max watched two baby Mudkip in particular on a rock, May ran to go catch one of them, finding those two Mudkips on the rock specifically cute. However, right as she approached the rock, a large Mudkip, certainly not a baby, jumped from the bushes, startling May and getting her attention as she turned towards it, allowing her to get sprayed in the face by its water gun as it was trying to protect the babies, leading May to complain that she just didn't have good luck with water Pokemon at all, it seemed. While all this was going on, a different baby Mudkip happened to be engaging with another one in a play fight, and as a result, this baby Mudkip accidentally fell into the water and was being swept away by the current of the lake. And everyone noticed the baby Mudkip frightened as it was heading straight for the waterfall, going around the island, leading Brock to quickly take action as he orders his Lotad to save the Mudkip, leading Lotad to jump into the water, and although it was able to reach Mudkip and secure it by putting it on its lily pad, the current was too strong, and simply pulled Lotad along as well. So now, Lotad and the baby Mudkip were being taken away by the current. Brock called out for his Lotad as he tried running along the lake on the grass to try and retrieve his Lotad and also save the baby Mudkip, but before he could make it, the big Mudkip that had squirted May took action, running up to the edge of the lake on the grass, getting ahead of Brock as it managed to pull Lotad and the baby Mudkip back to the shore, all because of its own strength, being able to go against the current. Brock was obviously amazed by the Mudkip's strength, so he ran up to it to thank it for saving Lotad. However, the big Mudkip seemed hesitant to be around Brock as it quickly jumped back with an angry look on its face, implying that it didn't want to be around him. Brock knew that the big Mudkip must have been wary around humans, especially because of May trying to catch one of the babies, so Brock tried to befriend the big Mudkip, assuring it that he had good intentions and apologized for May's actions, trying to convince it that May wasn't actually trying to catch the baby and was merely just trying to observe it since she found it cute. Ash, May, and Max then approached the big Mudkip to convince it that they meant no harm as well. But the big Mudkip was startled by them, and this resulted in the big Mudkip running away into the bushes. Brock quickly takes his attention away from the big Mudkip as he turns it back to the baby Mudkip and was happy to see that it was unharmed from the whole ordeal and was still sitting atop Lotad. Just as Brock began to play with the Mudkip, though, an old man with the hairstyle of a Mudkip fin popped out of the bushes. Because of the old man's resemblance to Mudkip, Ash and May got frightened as they initially mistook the old man for a Mudkip monster that seemed to be a combination between a Mudkip and a human, but quickly realized that he was just a human when he revealed his whole body coming out of the bushes to yell at Ash and the gang, angrily asking Ash and the gang what the fuck they were doing trying to steal his Mudkip that he had raised, since he had saw Brock holding the baby Mudkip. May responded by merely putting her hands in a camera position again and starting to narrate what was happening to her, explaining how she was being yelled at, though Ash got mad at May for not actually trying to defend them and instead just messing the fuck around, as both he and Max told the old man what was really going on, being that Ash and the gang hadn't tried to harm the Mudkip at all, and they had just stumbled upon the lake, and Brock had saved the baby Mudkip after it almost drowned in the water, leading Brock to simply laugh and blush, embarrassed, not wanting to take credit for saving the Pokemon when it was actually the big Mudkip that had saved it. The old man was skeptical at first that Brock could have even remotely helped the baby Mudkip, not believing Ash. However, the old man quickly decided to believe Ash when he heard the baby Mudkip happily chirp around Brock, which made the old man come to the conclusion that the baby Mudkip must have liked Brock, and that must have been because he at least attempted to save it. So the old man apologizes for yelling and introduces himself as Old Man Swamp, explaining that he raised several of the Mudkip in the area in order to study them. Ash was more interested in the name Old Man Swamp, as opposed to what Old Man Swamp did for a living, so he proceeded to walk up to Old Man Swamp and poke at him while making fun of his stupid-ass name, by saying several swamp-related puns, which made the old man kind of ticked off as he told Ash to back off, leading Ash to cowardly nervously laugh and stop. Old Man Swamp appreciated this, so he said if Ash really wanted to call him a different name, he could call him his nickname, Swampy. Ash was about to make fun of this name, but Brock interrupted, asking why Old Man Swampy was spending all of his time studying the Mudkip, and why he cared about doing so much, leading Old Man Swampy to reason that Mudkip were very social and interesting Pokemon, but they needed a lot of protection. So he was interested in their personality, and he also wanted to protect them. Pretty basic motivation. Old Man Swampy then changed the subject, asking why Ash and the gang were by his domain in the first place, leading Ash and the gang to explain that they climbed the waterfall down below so that they could train, which surprised Swampy, as he was shocked that trainers would give up their training time just to save one of his Mudkip, and as thanks for this, Swampy forgave Ash and the gang for trespassing in his property because they saved one of the Mudkip, or at least helped. He also decided to give Ash and the gang another reward for saving the baby Mudkip, being a free lunch and some tea. While they were all eating and drinking, Brock questioned Old Man Swampy on what exactly he did to help raise the Mudkip, leading Old Man Swampy to explain that the main thing he did wasn't even really raising them once they were born, it was getting them born in the first place, as he actually was the one who bred the Mudkip. Upon hearing this, Brock and Ash then spotted an egg incubator with several blue eggs with orange spots inside, with the incubator sitting on a table and being covered in glass to protect it. Upon seeing Brock and Ash take interest in these eggs, Old Man Swampy clarified that those eggs were Mudkip eggs that he bred. Brock then asked Old Man Swampy another question, being where he got the Mudkip eggs in the first place, leading Mr. Swampy to explain that he got the Mudkip eggs from the Pokemon League, the Hoenn League specifically, and it was then that he raised the eggs until they hatched and were high enough level to be the starter Pokemon for trainers starting their journeys in the Hoenn region. Ash and the gang were a little confused, as they didn't think that anyone had access to the starter Pokemon aside from the professors. But Old Man Swampy assured Ash and the gang that he was telling the truth, reminding them how when the starter Pokemon were with the professors, they were all at a certain level, being level 5, ready to battle for whatever trainer picked them, and explained that they obviously didn't start out at level 5, they had to be raised to that level first before they could even be given to the professor to give out to trainers, and he was the person in charge of getting those Pokemon to that level. Although Old Man Swampy did clarify that Professor Birch did do the same work that he did as well. Mr. Swampy just helped provide Birch with more starter Pokemon, but Professor Birch did raise some of the starters to level 5 himself. The only difference was that Professor Birch would usually find starters that had already hatched and were out in the wild, as opposed to Old Man Swampy, who would help hatch the Mudkip, or the starters in general. And he proceeded to brag about how him and Professor Birch were kind of similar fame level in Hoenn, since they were both so crucial to trainers starting their journey. Even though May hadn't heard of Old Man Swampy before, she didn't want to risk him potentially being famous and her not doing anything about it, so she proceeded to film him doing her reporter act again, trying to interview him. I don't know why the fuck she was so hellbent on that, man. Anyways, Brock then admitted to Old Man Swampy that he clearly wasn't as famous as Birch, because he had heard of Professor Birch, but he hadn't heard of him, which annoyed Old Man Swampy, as he started to name off some of his achievements in raising Pokemon, but this led Ash and May to admit that they didn't know him either. Thankfully for Old Man Swampy, he appeared to at least have a little bit of fame, as Max stated that he recognized him from the magazine known as Pokemon Monthly, with Old Man Swampy happily declaring that he knew he was in that magazine. Max then acted surprised at the fact that he was the only one to have heard of Old Man Swampy, stating that Brock should have definitely known about him, since Brock was a Pokemon breeder, just like Old Man Swampy was. Although Brock retorted that although him and Old Man Swampy were technically under the same classification of breeder, Old Man Swampy actually focused on breeding the Pokemon, whereas Brock focused more on making sure they were taken care of after they were born. Swampy simply countered that he helped the Mudkip after they were born as well, so they were technically practicing the same thing. Old Man Swampy just happened to focus more on their birth as well, and suggested that if Brock truly wanted to be a Pokemon breeder, then he should get some experience with watching Pokemon hatch from some eggs, so that he could know what Pokemon were like when they were first born, to help them after they were born as well. So he offered to take Brock and the rest of the gang outside into his backyard, where he had some other Mudkip eggs that were preparing to hatch. So basically, he offered Brock, Ash, Max, and May the chance to watch these eggs hatch, and also offered Brock the opportunity to help him take care of the Mudkip right after they hatched. And Brock was extremely excited about this, declaring that he would love to help. So Old Man Swampy happily took Ash and the gang outside into his backyard, where he was waiting for a nest of 3 Mudkip eggs to hatch. Sure enough, after only a little bit of waiting, one of the eggs happened to hatch, and a baby Mudkip emerged. Of course, May found this baby Mudkip cute, and kneeled down to it, trying to introduce herself, though the baby Mudkip greeted her back by splashing her with a water gun, meaning the first thing it ever did was splash somebody. Upon seeing this, Brock was reminded of how May was sprayed by a Mudkip earlier, and this reminded him of the baby Mudkip falling into the water and a big Mudkip saving it. So he admitted to Old Man Swampy that that big Mudkip actually helped him save the baby Mudkip, and questioned why Old Man Swampy had a big Mudkip by his place when he only raised little ones. This led Old Man Swampy to explain that while he was definitely aware of the big Mudkip, it actually wasn't one that he had raised. It was a wild Pokemon. Explaining that the wild Mudkip had showed up because it wanted to protect all of the baby Mudkip until they were old enough to leave, to go to better water nearby that was more suitable for bigger Mudkip, until Old Man Swampy had to come back and give them to people such as Birch so that they could be given out to trainers. Old Man Swampy then stated that he was actually concerned for the bigger Mudkip, as soon all of the baby Mudkip that it liked to protect, specifically, would soon be taken away to other trainers, and therefore the big Mudkip would be left behind with all of its original Mudkip friends gone, and no trainer for itself. Basically, Old Man Swampy was saddened for the big Mudkip because it was too overleveled to be a starter Pokemon itself, and it would be forced to keep on making new friends, since all of the other Mudkip would be given to new trainers, forcing new Mudkip to be bred, and then he would make friends with those, and then they would be given to trainers, and the process would just keep repeating. Upon hearing all this from Old Man Swampy, Brock was concerned for the Mudkip as well, though he actually was very impressed by it now. Impressed at the fact that the big Mudkip wasn't even supposed to be staying at Old Man Swampy's, but it wanted to, simply just to protect others. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they were currently searching for Ash and the gang, trying to spy on them, having heard the voices of Ash and the gang in the distance, and soon enough, they followed these voices to a nearby fence, which happened to be Swampy's property fence. Although, since they couldn't see Old Man Swampy's property and just the fence, they questioned why a fucking fence was out in the middle of nowhere, leading James to theorize that the fence might have been placed to protect something valuable on the other side from potential intruders, and suggested that they should be the intruders. Jessie and Meowth agreed with James, especially Jessie, loving the thought of valuable treasure. However, Meowth worried that they wouldn't be able to get by the fence, although Jessie, desperate to get in, assured Meowth that she had a way, as she sent out her Seviper, while James sent out his Cacnea, and Jessie and James ordered them both to attack the fence to try and destroy it, although of course, Cacnea hugged James first, prickling him. Seviper started off with Poison Tail, although it did nothing to the fence. However, when Cacnea used Needle Arm, it may have actually been powerful enough to break through the fence, but we would never know, as Cacnea accidentally attacked James instead, which actually benefited Team Rocket, as it made him crash into the fence, breaking it, allowing Team Rocket to obviously go past the fence. However, just as they did, Wobbuffet forcibly popped out of its Pokeball, causing it to land on a rope in the process and accidentally pull on it, which caused several cans in Old Man Swampy's backyard to rattle, as essentially the rope that Wobbuffet had stepped on was connected to these cans, and essentially the cans acted as an alerting system to alert Old Man Swampy if there were any trespassers, and upon hearing the cans rattle, Old Man Swampy told Ash and the gang about this mechanism and rushed away, explaining that he had to go over to the fence to investigate and potentially catch any potential people who were trying to break in. Ash and the gang were obviously concerned by this, so they chased after Old Man Swampy to try and help him confront the potential trespassers, as May proceeded to make a camera pose with her hands again and narrate again as a reporter, since she found this exciting. However, before Ash and the gang could catch up to Old Man Swampy, Brock soon left Ash and the gang because he had spotted none other than the big Mudkip. He was shocked to see the big Mudkip where he was, as he expected the big Mudkip to stay relatively close to the rest of the baby Mudkip, so he asked the big Mudkip why he was where he was, but the Mudkip simply just ran away, leading Brock to chase it all the way back to the lake, although he couldn't find it, as it had disappeared, hiding again. So he called for it, and although the big Mudkip was scared, it slowly came out of the bushes. Brock was frustrated with the big Mudkip being so scared around him, so he tried his best to assure it once again that he didn't want to harm the big Mudkip at all, but it was still nervous despite this. So Brock tried Plan B, which was to pull out some of his Pokemon food from his backpack and offer it to Mudkip. However, the big Mudkip refused to eat, walking backwards. Brock was disappointed, sighing, though he was unsurprised by Mudkip's hesitance, stating that Mudkip shouldn't feel bad about not wanting to eat, since he knew that the two of them had only just met, and he knew that he might need to find some other way to get Mudkip's trust before it ate anything, admitting that he wouldn't eat anything from someone that he didn't trust either. Meanwhile, as for Swampy, Ash, Max, and May, they had arrived and saw the destroyed fence, along with all the cans stomped that were nearby, signifying that Wobbuffet must have stepped on more rope and accidentally brought some of those cans down and stepped on them. Obviously, as they all inspected the damage of the fence, Swampy stated his suspicions had to have been confirmed, and someone had to have intruded. So, Old Man Swampy looked around the area where the fence had been destroyed to investigate, and stepped on one of the already crushed cans. And he soon picked it up, wondering if he could find more cans that were potentially laid out in a path, and wondered if he could use this path to find where the intruders had gone off to, since they were no longer by the fence. Swampy didn't have to go through with any of this, though, as he and Ash, May, and Max then heard a whole bunch of evil laughter, which attracted their attention to some nearby bushes, as Team Rocket popped out of those bushes and did their motto, introducing themselves. As they explained that after Wobbuffet had stepped on the first can, they realized that the cans were likely to alert someone, so they decided to hide in the bushes and wait for them to arrive. And sure enough, Old Man Swampy and Ash, May, and Max did arrive. Old Man Swampy was obviously left confused by Team Rocket's motto, as he'd never heard of Team Rocket before, leading Ash to inform him of the fact that Team Rocket were criminals, and they were probably here to steal the Mudkip. This led Old Man Swampy to yell at Team Rocket, stating he knew their plan to steal his Mudkips, and he wouldn't let them, since they were so rare. Unfortunately, though, Old Man Swampy saying this would be very bad, since Team Rocket actually weren't initially planning on stealing the Mudkips, as they didn't know that Old Man Swampy had any. But now, hearing that they were rare, Team Rocket became very excited, wanting to catch the Mudkip, as James jumped for joy and began fantasizing about the huge promotion he would get from Giovanni if he gave him a whole bunch of Mudkips, and Jessie began fantasizing as well about having a cute Mudkip to enter contests with, although also agreed with James, as did Meowth, that they should give some of the Mudkip to Giovanni to get a big promotion. Old Man Swampy was at first confused as to how Team Rocket were acting, leading May to yell at Old Man Swampy for informing Team Rocket of the Mudkip in the first place, leading Old Man Swampy to realize what he had done, and explain that he never had been able to keep his mouth shut or keep a secret. He just couldn't help but talk about the Mudkip. May decided to quit yelling at Old Man Swampy, as she was primarily concerned with the safety of the Mudkip if she asked if the Mudkip would be safe in the lake. Although she whispered this to ensure that Team Rocket wouldn't find out that the Mudkip were in the nearby lake. However, this was unfortunately revealed anyways, as Old Man Swampy replied to her at a normal volume that the Mudkip would be okay, since they could just swim away if the intruders arrived, but worried that the intruders may destroy the small dam which was in the lake to stop the current, and therefore, if the dam was destroyed, the Mudkip would end up getting caught in the current and would be washed away, allowing Team Rocket to easily capture them, since they would wash over to a certain area and all gather up in one area, basically. This led Ash to get mad at Swampy this time, explaining to him that he had just revealed another secret, because now Team Rocket knew that they could simply just break the dam, and therefore all the Mudkip would wash to a specific spot, making them easy for them to catch. Max and May then showed their disappointment as well, as Swampy quickly covered his mouth to avoid giving out any more information, but Team Rocket just laughed, as they had managed to hear everything. So, James promptly sent out his Cacnea to destroy the dam, using Needle Arm. However, when Cacnea used Needle Arm, it instead used Needle Arm on James as opposed to the dam, just like how it had used Needle Arm on James instead of the fence. And as a result, this actually benefited Team Rocket again, as James was sent flying into the dam wall, causing a massive hole in it, and the water to begin moving in a very fast pace, as the water quickly formed waves. Meanwhile, back with Brock, he was still trying to convince the big Mudkip to accept his food, when suddenly he was alerted by the current of the lake changing and a big wave approaching all of the baby Mudkip. And the big Mudkip saw this as well, and obviously got very defensive, wanting to protect the young Mudkip. So Brock took action, as he sent out his fortress and had it use Rapid Spin to blow the wave back, stopping it from hitting the baby Mudkip. Although Brock knew that Fortress's Rapid Spin couldn't keep the wave back forever, so he worked together with his Lotad, who he sent out to bring all of the Mudkip to safety, with Lotad loading all of the really little ones onto its lily pad and bringing them out of the water and onto the shore, and meeting up with Brock and the big Mudkip, who had brought all of the moderately sized baby Mudkip to shore as well. Although Brock soon realized that Fortress was having trouble holding back the wave, so he and the big Mudkip and his Lotad all worked together to bring all of the baby Mudkip to higher ground where the wave couldn't hit them. Brock then thanked all of the baby Mudkip for their cooperation, and congratulated the big Mudkip and his Lotad on being able to help so much. Although Brock and the big Mudkip then realized that two baby Mudkip were still out in the water and hadn't been brought to shore yet, and the big Mudkip took action all on its own, as it simply jumped into the water and brought the two Mudkip to shore with the other ones, just as Fortress managed to lose control of the wave, and flew up to the higher ground to avoid the wave, where Brock, Lotad, and all the Mudkip were. And Brock congratulated Fortress on all of its efforts, as it didn't really matter that it had lost control of the wave, since all the Mudkip were now safe. Just then, though, Brock noticed that there was still one more baby Mudkip who was now being washed away thanks to the wave that was now uncontrolled. Of course, as I'm sure you would expect, the big Mudkip rushed in to protect this baby Mudkip, as it managed to grab hold of it, although since the current was so strong, they were simply both being pushed, and they were unable to swim to shore, being sent over the waterfall. Just as Brock had gone back down to the main shore, running across the shoreline trying to reach the two Mudkip, as Max, May, and Ash, and Swampy arrived as well to see what was going on, although Brock, Ash, May, Max, and Swampy were all too late, as both the Mudkip had went over the waterfall now. Thankfully, though, before both of the Mudkip could fully fall, the big Mudkip put the baby Mudkip inside of its mouth, allowing it to grab on to a rock down the waterfall, as the Mudkip proceeded to hang on for dear life, while the waterfall beat down on both the Mudkip. By this point, Brock had just arrived at the bottom of the waterfall, back where he, May, Max, and Ash had first climbed up, and called up to the two Mudkip, letting them know that he was going to try and save them, as he then spotted his rope and the rock attached to it that he used to climb the waterfall earlier, still attached to the tree branch. So, Brock decided to tie himself to the rope that was still attached to the tree branch, as he then dived in the water. Since the rope was tied to the tree branch, this would prevent him from falling down the waterfall. So, he eventually managed to dive down to where the rock that the two Mudkip were hanging onto on the waterfall, and tried to reach out for it and grab it, urging the Mudkip to trust him and grab his hand, as he couldn't quite reach the Mudkip on his own. The big Mudkip still hesitated to fully trust Brock, although Brock reminded it that it would fall down if it didn't come up with Brock, so essentially it had no choice. Mudkip still hesitated, but after a lot of Brock's desperate pleading, explaining that he didn't want the Mudkips to get hurt, the big Mudkip decided to trust Brock, also due to the fact that it wanted to save the baby Mudkip, as the big Mudkip stretched out its tail, so it was closer for Brock to grab. And although Brock still struggled to grab it, straining, almost breaking his own back, Brock was able to grab the two Mudkip and kept them held tight in his arms, as Ash and the gang and Swampy pulled Brock up with the rope that was attached to the tree, bringing him and the two Mudkip finally to safety, rescuing them, allowing Brock to sit down and the big Mudkip to release the baby Mudkip from its mouth. Swampy then questioned Brock if he was alright, with Brock confirming, leading Swampy to thank Brock for another great rescue of one of his Mudkip. But Brock reminded Swampy that just like the first time, it was actually the big Mudkip that had done most of the work, explaining how this time around, the big Mudkip had jumped into the water to save the little one and had the courage to let out its tail and trust Brock, allowing Brock to save them. Basically, he was giving all the credit to the big Mudkip. Just then, this happy moment was interrupted as Ash and the gang and Swampy heard a loud crash, which turned out to be Team Rocket cutting down trees, which Ash and the gang soon spotted as they turned around and saw that Team Rocket was cutting down the trees using their new Mudkip mech, even though it barely resembled the Mudkip. Team Rocket then spotted Ash and the gang, and they did their motto, declaring their plan to steal all the Mudkip in their new machine, which they apparently called not just a Mudkip mech, but the mechanized Mudkip Maiden. So that explained why it didn't really look like a Mudkip, because it was meant to be the Mudkip's maiden. Anyways, after cutting down the trees where several of the baby Mudkip had run off to play, Team Rocket used the mechanized Mudkip Maiden's shovel hands to scoop up all of the baby Mudkip and put them inside of the bag that was attached to the mech. Ash and the gang ordered Team Rocket to stop, as did Swampy, though of course Team Rocket refused. So Brock tried to think of an idea to try and stop Team Rocket, desperate to save the Mudkip, but unfortunately he couldn't. But then he noticed that the mech's foot was starting to sink into the mud, which made him remember how the area was very muddy. So Brock decided to use this to his advantage, as he informed Ash and the gang of his plan, and then implemented it, as he told Lotad and the big Mudkip to use water gun on the mud below the robot to make the mud even wetter and muddier. Team Rocket were initially confused by this, as they merely laughed, taunting how a little water never hurt anyone, believing that Brock's efforts were entirely stupid and futile. However, they soon noticed that just as Brock had planned, all this extra water had made the ground even muddier, so Team Rocket's mech was beginning to fully sink. And the mech only sank more as Lotad and Mudkip continued their water guns. However, Mudkip soon stopped using water gun and instead used tackle on the now sinking robot's loot bag to break it open and free the rest of the baby Mudkip. Yay! With Swampy immensely pleased with all of his baby Mudkip being freed, Ash then didn't have to worry about harming the baby Mudkip anymore, so he told Pikachu to use a full power Thunderbolt, just as Brock had suggested as well, which sent Team Rocket blasting off and destroyed their Mudkip maiden mech. Ash and the gang and Swampy then accompanied all the baby Mudkip as they returned back into the lake, with Brock congratulating the big Mudkip on doing such a good job on freeing the others, and listening to his command for the Mudkip to use water gun. Ash, upon noticing this, declared that since the Mudkip had listened to Brock, it and Brock would make a really good team, and Old Man Swampy actually agreed with this, thanking Brock and the Mudkip for saving the baby Mudkip, and suggesting that Brock should take the big Mudkip with him, since it was wild, and not his anyways, and like Ash had said, he and the big Mudkip got along really well. Even though Brock wanted to take the big Mudkip with him, he asked Mr. Old Man Swampy if that would actually be a good idea, reminding Old Man Swampy how the big Mudkip had the job of protecting all the baby Mudkip. Old Man Swampy just replied that all of the baby Mudkip would eventually leave to future trainers anyways, so it would probably be best for the big Mudkip to finally go with a trainer as well, to see the world and get stronger, stating that the big Mudkip had already done a lot for the place, and it had earned to take some time for itself, stating his belief that someone like Brock would be the perfect trainer for the Mudkip. Ash, May, and Max encouraged Brock to take Mudkip as well, although Brock decided to ask the big Mudkip itself if it actually wanted to go with him. Mudkip initially hesitated, thinking it over for a little bit, since although it did like Brock, it was still naturally concerned due to not being used to humans, but when Brock promised that he would do his absolute best to take care of Mudkip, and that they would be a team no matter what, Mudkip happily jumped into Brock's arms, becoming Brock's third Pokemon on his team, and second Hoenn Pokemon. May, Max, and Ash then congratulate Brock on his new Mon as he hugs it happily, and the episode ends with Ash and the gang saying goodbye to Swampy, as Swampy reminds Brock to always take care of Mudkip, and for the two to act as a team. Very happy to see Mudkip have a new friend.